It took me a while to write this down, but it's a true story that happened to me personally in 2018. I was working part-time at a small hotel in Annaba, a coastal city in the east of Algeria, close to the Mediterranean Sea. It wasn't a luxury place, just a regular old building near the city center where travelers and businessmen used to stay. There was one thing everyone at the hotel knew: Room 27. We, the staff, never booked it unless the hotel was completely full. Officially, we used to say it was under maintenance, but the truth was, nobody wanted to deal with what happened there. One night, a businessman arrived late from Algiers. The hotel was full, except for room 27. I tried to convince him to take another option, even suggested he'd find another hotel. But he was tired and insisted, so I gave him the key. Around 2 a.m., I was at the reception desk when I saw him coming down the stairs, pale, sweating, shaking like he'd seen death itself. He dropped the key on the counter and whispered, "Who was in the room with me?" I said, "Sir, you were alone." He leaned closer, eyes wide. "No, I heard footsteps. Someone was walking inside. I heard coughing, doors opening and closing. But I was alone, right?" Before I could answer, he just left. Didn't even ask for his money back. The next morning, we checked room 27. The weirdest thing? All the heavy wooden chairs, which were bolted to the floor, were somehow turned to face the big mirror on the wall. Since that night, the management officially locked room 27. The door is chained from the inside. But sometimes, when the whole hotel is quiet, we still hear the door slam upstairs, like someone went inside. And the creepiest part, no one has touched that room since. I still remember that night to this day.
I was house sitting for some friends, and they rent out part of their upstairs room for a cheap price to the local college students. I used to rent from them, and when I moved out, I moved down the street, so I was an easy contact for pet care or house sitting while they were on trips. Needless to say, I knew the place well and was super comfortable taking care of it. Well, the first night I was around, I was cooking dinner and I heard something fall down the stairs to the upper bedroom. It sounded like a box full of books, like it was loud. The upper bedroom stairwell is closed off by a door, and I wasn't sure if the current tenant was around, so I knocked and asked if they were okay. I didn't get a response, so I yelled I was coming up to check on them. I opened the door, and the stairwell was empty. No box, no nothing. Went upstairs, and there was no tenant, and there wasn't anything I could see that was out of place. I was confused, but summed it up as just something my mind made up. A couple nights later, I was getting ready for bed. I was staying in the downstairs guest bedroom, and there's a light that's on a slider that will dim when someone adjusts it. There was also a sliding door I had closed to the bedroom. All this will come into play in a sec. Well, I was in bed and had the light all the way on when I heard footsteps upstairs. It was a heel-to-toe kind of sound, and it was making a figure-8 pattern in the bedroom upstairs. It was still decently early, maybe around 8 or so, and I texted the tenant to let her know I was downstairs and to let me know if I'm making too much noise to just shoot me a text. It was maybe an hour later, and I heard the footsteps again before receiving a reply from her. She said she was in the process of moving out and was actually out of town for 2 weeks, so not currently home. The footsteps stopped suddenly, and after a few beats, the sliding light in the bedroom slowly dimmed to off. I had about a second or two of silence before the sliding door to the bedroom rang out with a hug bang and started swaying on the sliding pole it was on. It looked like a person had punched it from the other side. Of course, when I opened it, there was no one around. I gathered my things and left the house. Still did all the chores throughout the week and took care of things around the home, but did not stay in that house after that. I didn't have anything spooky like that happen to me while I was renting the upstairs room, but notably, there was an attic door that liked to open up in the middle of the night. I always thought it was just an old house, so stuff like that happens. But after this experience, I'm not so sure, lol.
I was in my gothic phase, still am, and my Pepito and I were not on good terms. He was hosting a family reunion auction, and so he went to New York to acquire some goods to sell. When he returned, he had a couple of big boxes full of jewelry. He tried to sweeten me up by telling me I could have first pick. I went down and had a look. This was in 2010 or so. There was a lot of gaudy stuff, but I did find a few things I liked okay. There was a Surf's Up bracelet, a Tupac chain to give to a crush, and a gaudy necklace that had a big leopard print base and then big gems on top. I came back upstairs and showed my dad my loot, and he was like, "That's all? Go down there and pick out some more before all the good stuff gets sold." I dug through each box carefully, but there were mostly just duplicates of the same jewelry and a few others that were too corny for me. Then I took a final look in the box and found the necklace that didn't fit it. It had a wooden carved skull as the amulet, and the necklace was made up of miniature white skull beads. I smelled it, and it had a distinct smoky and sweet aroma. I was excited because it was goth-looking. I showed it to my dad, and he said that he didn't remember getting that necklace, but shrugged it off. It was too small for my head, so I cut the string and extended it with some hemp I had. From that point, I never took it off. Now, at the time, I'd already had a lot of magical experiences and felt a bit like an outcast. My lunch number was 10666 for crying out loud. My friends were fascinated by the necklace. One of them touched it and said he felt like it didn't want to go to him. Later that morning at school, I made a joke about that same friend getting sick from the school's chocolate milk, only for seconds later for him to start puking after drinking a carton. Next were people claiming they were getting weird texts from nowhere that said hex when seated next to me. I was at my lunch table, and one of the girls who sat there was genuinely terrified of me for some reason. I was getting tired of all the witch jokes and teased the whole table that I hoped they all didn't get food poisoning. The next day at lunch, only 2 people of the 8 were there. I asked where the others were and was told they called out sick. Then I was in Spanish class, and the witch jokes continued. A kid wanted to skip class and told me to give him a headache so he could leave. Now this kid, to be fair, believed magic was nonsense and that I was attention-seeking. He more so wanted to embarrass me. I told him, "Ta-da, you have a headache." Nothing seemed to happen. But then about 30 minutes later, he started grabbing his head and asking me what I did. I was like, "Come on, man." He said, "No, I'm serious." He then got permission to leave class to go to the nurse's office. Again, I felt like the witch jokes were getting stale. So then I'm on the school bus, and one of the girls I considered a friend was making fun of another girl who had a cold sore, saying she had herpes. I stood up and told her to stop bullying the girl or it could happen to her next. 2 days later, she got on the bus covering her mouth saying, "This is your fault." I was like, "What?" She moved her hands away and she had a huge cold sore on her lip. This is where things took a turn. My sister and I got into an argument, and I told her I hoped she wrecked her car. One day when I got home from school, my dad sat me down and showed me a photo of my sister's totaled car. My nephew had been in the car as well. They were all okay, but this terrified me. I was scared to make jokes or say anything I would regret. Word had spread at my school and on my school bus that I was a witch. Another atheist friend of mine was defending me on the bus ride home one day. He was saying witches weren't real and that he would prove it for once and for all. He asked me to tell him something that would happen and to be specific. I told him that as he got off the bus, he would trip over his shoelace, fall down the bus stairs, and bust his knee on the asphalt. As the ride continued, we were joking and chatting and laughing, and I honestly forgot about what I said. We all did. As Daniel got off the bus, he turned and waved goodbye to me. As he stepped off the steps, he tripped over his shoelaces and fell onto his knees on the asphalt. He stood up and pointed at me and said, "You're really a witch?" I cannot describe how that moment felt for me. Like time was moving slow, like reality was bending. It was so bizarre. My friend looked fearful and confused. The bus was silent. I got off my stop feeling ashamed. Well, it gets stranger. During summer vacation, a few relatives wanted to travel to Gatlinburg, Tennessee, and see the Ripley's Believe It or Not Museum and the aquarium too. I had a young cousin who went as well. He was about 8 at the time. I was having a blast at the museum. We were looking at a display of the tallest man who ever lived,
and we went through a few display cases that had Native American artifacts, which I relate to as an indigenous Brazilian. Finally, my papita said it was time to head back, and we were passing by another case of African artifacts. My cousin started screaming at me, "Look, look!" I was like, "What?" He said, "It's the same as yours." As I turned and looked into the African artifacts case, the exact necklace I was wearing was on display. Two of them, in fact, showing the front and back of the model. They were identical. Yet again, the world was spinning and I was so confused. The case said the necklace was theorized to be a healing necklace, but it wasn't for me. It was like a tool to amplify words. It was shocking. I actually submitted my story to a Glitch in the Matrix YouTube channel and figured I would share it here as well. I always believed in magic and felt lucky that I got to experience it. But to be honest, I believe this was all one big prank being pulled on me by my peers until I saw my sister's car wrapped around a light post. And then when my friend fell, it made it more real. When I saw the same necklace at the museum, I didn't know what to think. How did I get it? How did my papito go to New York to buy cheap jewelry for an option and end up with this artifact? And why did we randomly travel so far to Gatlinburg and happen to see its sisters in a display case at a museum? What was it trying to show me? I think now how hilarious it would have been to have taken a photo next to the display, wearing my necklace with the ones in the cases beside me, and submitting that to Ripley's Believe It or Not. But at the time, I hid my necklace worrying they would think I stole one of the displays. Anywho, this is one of many supernatural stories I've experienced. Thanks for reading.
This story may be short, or it may be drawn out. I am recounting these events as I type, as it was honestly one of the most horrifying things I have experienced, and it brings me genuine stress to think about. This happened maybe 2-3 years ago. I live in southern West Virginia, and have for my entire life. The woods and mountains surround every direction you look, and nighttime is a darkness that you can never dream of unless experienced. I was with a friend, I'll call him Mark. Mark was at my house one evening, doing the usual things, watching UFC, playing Xbox, etc. It was extremely late when we finally got bored and decided to go for a walk on a nearby trail to smoke a joint. This is not a particularly long trail, but it is very dense in the woods that surround it, and it is easy to get freaked out when thinking of your surroundings. We finally get to about halfway into the trail, about 30 minutes in, where we stop, pack our joint, and stand on the trail to chill and talk. The forest is very alive tonight. There are always noises in the woods, but the amount of animal activity for the time was unsettling. At this point, it was probably past 1 a.m. This was strange and kind of eerie, but not alerting, as any sort of predatory animal in the area may cause a disturbance. We finish smoking and continue our walk when almost immediately the forest falls dead quiet. And as soon as the forest goes quiet, there is a voice. It almost sounds like a mocking humanoid voice, shaky and uncertain. Almost like an old children's toy, like the ones with the crackly speakers and robotic voice, if you know what I mean. This immediately sets us off. We bolt directly down the opposite length of the trail, but the sound does not gain distance. It doesn't get closer per se, but no matter how far we ran down the trail, this eerie voice remains the same volume, going over and over with no quieting or stopping. At this point, I am convinced that we are in genuine danger, something I have felt very few times. Finally, after sprinting for who knows how long, we exit the trail, grasping for breath and almost at the verge of tears of how frightening this was. We begin to exit the trail, and about 5 minutes from the exit, there is a bone-shaking, heart-stopping, murderous scream from directly behind us. I know what a mountain lion sounds like. This was not an animal. This was not someone playing or watching a movie. This scream sent birds flying from nests and made my heart drop into my stomach. It was the most genuinely depraved and violent scream that I have ever heard. This is a true story that I have only told to maybe 3 people, all of whom seem to brush it off as false. I've never been a person to push for the existence of the paranormal or spiritual, but I genuinely believe I encountered something inhuman in those woods. Edit. I know I will receive questions such as what the voice was possibly saying, or to explain the area and what happened after. I genuinely cannot remember what the voice was saying, if anything intelligible. I don't know if I could understand it then, and I certainly can't recall understanding it after several years of blocking it out of my memory. All that I recall is that it was a fluctuating voice in pitch, shaking, almost just joining sounds together. After running from the scream at the end of the trail, we ran to the car, which was only about 5 more minutes from the trail, so we got there relatively fast from sprinting.